There are a lot of people who want to influence how a company does business, and the number of stakeholders on a company is growing rapidly. One of the most powerful ones is non-governmental organizations. Previously, developing an NGO and building the credibility and having the ability to impact how a company does business was a very long process. It cost you a lot of money, it took a lot of time, and at the end of the day, companies could choose to ignore you. Today, NGOs, because of the access they have to the internet and the access that they have to the media and the access that they have to information, there are some NGOs who actually know more about a particular area of the company's business than that business may know. There are NGO organizations, for example, that will come to a company and say, I know that you're emitting this much in this, into the environment, and I know that here's the number of pounds of emissions, and here's this, and here's this, and here. And they've got their information down. It's very accurate. And then they put their own models together and their own analysis, and they can come to the company and they can say, you have a problem here. We want you to behave differently, and here's why. And the companies have to take them seriously because they know what they're talking about, and they obviously have influence, and they can influence a lot of other people. This slide is taken from a survey that was done by Ketchum, and it talks about influentials around the globe, and they're focused on much more than financials. They want companies to pay attention to employees, treat them ethically, treat them fairly. They also want them to focus on the environment. If you're going to open up a plant in our community, we want to make sure that you operate it in a certain way. Innovation is also something that they're concerned about, but the least of their concerns is the shareholders and philanthropy. They're now wanting to impact how companies actually do business. They're not just coming and saying, will you give us some money for the symphony? That's not enough anymore. You have to be actively engaged in the community. Many of these organizations are saying that the responsibility of a company goes far beyond simply making profits. And there's a lot of truth to that. You have to have the permission to operate in the economy. And that permission comes from the local communities. If you don't have that trust and support, you won't be successful. This is also corporate expectations. This is what corporations are expected now to pay attention to. The 3 E's are employees, being ethical, and then focusing on the environment. So it's no longer enough to simply make a profit, provide jobs, and contribute to the economy. Companies now are being asked to really pay more attention to how they treat their employees. And one of the things that has caused a real rift between communities and corporations, and one of the factors that has caused people to trust corporations very little, is this whole issue of executive compensation. You know, we talk about treating employees fairly and ethically, and then you find out that most of your employees are being paid $30,000 or $40,000 a year, and the CEO is making who knows how much, and people are asking themselves, how is that ethical? Not only, no, they're not asking how is it fair, because you can argue that the CEO may impact, and there's a financial argument to be made that a good CEO is going to create jobs and is going to create wealth and is going to do all these other things, and so you can therefore justify a high salary. But that's not enough anymore. Those arguments are not flying anymore. Instead, it's being framed as an ethical issue. You know, this is something that goes much beyond an economic argument. And then focusing on the environment, I think that that's fairly obvious. A lot of NGOs and other stakeholders believe that companies have a responsibility to protect the environment. This next survey was rate the honesty and the ethical standards of people in these different fields. And you'll see the business executives only 12% of people rated business executives as honest or ethical. At the very top of the list, you see nurses. So if any of you want to be admired and loved, I suggest you change your major to nursing. Those people are viewed as honest and ethical, and you can trust them. But if you look at this list, it's fairly discouraging. Journalists are trusted much more than business executives, but their numbers are not all that high to begin with. And at the very bottom of the list is people who often are involved in the communications department. Those are the corporate lobbyists who either report up through government affairs, which normally reports up through corporate communications. And those people, unfortunately, only 5% view them as ethical and honest. Well, who's a credible spokesperson for a company then? This is taken from the Edelman Trust Barometer. Many of you may have seen this information before. But finding out, well, who can I believe is a key question. And you see that business executives don't do too well. CEOs do not do very well at all. You see that they're the next to the last column over there. Only 35%. So again, an academic or an expert on the company is probably a better person to put in touch with the media than to put your CEO in front of the media. If you want someone whose message is going to be believed and trusted. Trust in institutions. This is another interesting slide. Which institutions do we trust will operate in society's best interest? The military is at the very top of the list. Protecting us is ranked very highly. NGOs are next because these organizations are viewed as honest, ethical, and they're doing something out of a noble purpose. So they're trusted next. Education system does pretty well, operating in the society's best interest. The health system, maybe. Trade unions, labor, we're not so sure, only 2%. And then you get to our legal system, and you've actually got negative numbers on this. Do we trust institutions to operate in the society's best interest? You have negative numbers on this survey for the legal system, really negative numbers for global companies, and if you're a large global company, really, really bad numbers. So if you're sitting in the corporate communicator's seat, and the CEO looks at these numbers, and they can say, well, okay, you're the guy who's supposed to build trusting relationships with all of these stakeholders in the public. How are you doing? And it doesn't look like you're doing a very good job. Your job is probably in jeopardy. And yet this is a very tough thing to turn around. Trust in leaders is on par with the institutions. This survey actually looked at the differences in different countries and asked the question, do you trust them at all or do you trust them completely? And then we ranked them on a scale. The interesting thing is I've got a circle around India there. And you see that their numbers, we trust corporations. 37% said, yes, I trust completely or trust significantly. And 36% trust CEOs of corporations when we survey folks in India. When you look at the US, the numbers are very different. It's only 11%, and CEOs only are trusted 9%. The numbers in Canada are even worse. They trust their CEOs only 5%. And so as you look across these numbers, you see that there's a difference between the developing nations and the established countries in terms of, do we trust corporations? And I thought this was fascinating. You could probably debate all day on the reasons for these survey results. But one easy speculation is that corporations in India and China, Brazil, some of the emerging economies, are viewed as doing good things for the people in that country because they're providing jobs. They're lifting people out of poverty. We tend to take corporations for granted here. We tend to think that we're owed a job, that we're entitled to something, and so we view corporations very differently than they're viewed in developing nations.